Very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rama. I'll be the moderator for this session. I come from a thought leadership company called CIO Academy Asia. We are a Singapore-based thought leadership company on technology. Now, enough about me. I'd like to welcome the panel members. We are not going to run through each and individual's background. I think it's all up on the screen. So we'll take it that the audience can have a good look at who they are. I'm very excited because we've got a very good lineup here in the panel. And it's a pretty big panel, but I'm quite sure it's going to be exciting. Yeah. So we are coming towards the tail end of the day. Let's see if we can pump up the volume. Yeah. And everybody will be ready for the networking session. Now, the topic for today is about examining IoT's value impact on government, industry, and the wider economy. I'd like to just quote a report from the McKinsey Global Institute. It caught my fancy because the title was kind of interesting. The Internet of Things, Mapping the Value Beyond the Hype. Okay, so I thought that title was kind of apt for this discussion. It went on to say that the IoT has a total potential economic impact of from 3.9 trillion to 11.1 trillion a year by 2025. It would be equivalent to about 11% of the world economy. Sometimes I wonder when they have quotes like this, when we do come to 2025, will anybody hold them against it? I guess not. But anyway, it's a pretty good idea that they're trying to put across, which is IoT is going to be a game changer, right? Whether you like it or not, it's going to disrupt, it's going to create waves. So this is where I'm going to ask Charles. Charles opened the session this morning, and he talked about various aspects of IoT. And the one that caught my eye most was one part of his presentation where he talked about how he felt that IoT could be more than what it is in terms of its adoption. There are challenges, and I would like to zero in on that aspect of your presentation. So Charles, can you please start off with the discussion?
Okay, so we'll start with the negatives. What are the challenges we face?
Please.
I think I have a different perspective on this than a lot of people, because a lot of people will say that, well, the technology isn't ready. I don't believe that. I think the technology is here. It's just a matter of how do you actually integrate multiple technologies from multiple vendors to create a single solution. And then a lot of people will say, well, there's all the security issues. And we have security solutions that can lock down any device. The problem is actually with us not identifying the risk beforehand, because it's not just the endpoint security, you need over-the-air data at rest security as well. But for me, if it comes down, the biggest challenge we face is with us as people, as organizations which are made up of people, because we are trying to apply the same processes that we've used for the last 50 years to IoT, and it's different. We need to have much more open environments. We need to base all of our technology on platforms to make us more flexible. And what I think we need to do is basically start getting people more ready for this. And I was speaking with somebody earlier about it, and they said, well, should we be teaching more technology at university? And I said, what would be great is if we took technologists at university and engineering students and taught them how to apply technologies to a business process, and then teach people who are studying marketing or operations to understand the value of technology, because it's going to be disrupting their business. Right now, the way we tend to educate people is we split it off, saying, okay, you study this, and then you wonder why when we come together as an organization, it's very disparate. So I think there's this chance, and what we can actually do is get people to learn across these different areas, and then start working together more. But I honestly think, it's up to us whether it's going to succeed. And a lot of the solutions, if you look over the last 15, 20 years, enterprise mobility, we've barely delivered any value out of that. And I know because I've been working on it since before the BlackBerry, and I'm disappointed that we've made a lot of mistakes. And I'm hoping we don't make those same mistakes again. So that's why whenever I get a chance, I'm going to get on my soapbox and rant that we have to change our attitudes and the way we actually want to try and drive value out of this.
Pretty good, Charles. So you talked about
pretty
people
good,
and changes.
Okay, I thought it was better than pretty good, but
yeah, very good.
I like that much more.
Okay.
I get a gold star.
So you created a pretty good segue for water. Water comes from GE, and as you know, GE has got a long history. In fact, you just mentioned to me it's about like 125 years. you've gone through a series of transformation. Maybe you could relate to some of the things that Charles has said, and maybe you could give us some good use cases of IoT in your organization.
So I totally agree. I mean, IoT is not a dream. In the industry, industrial IoT is happening today, and we've been doing it over the last years. If you look at equipment that, for example, GE has put out in the field, I mean, there's been software on it for 100 years. So now what is the next stage is, of course, to make sure that this software is gathered, that all the data are gathered, and that we can make sense out of it, and that we help use this to predict and improve the performance of equipment. So this is currently happening. To give you an example, when a flight goes from Jakarta to Singapore, you know, one engine has about 100 sensors on it, and it's constantly monitoring a lot of different parameters. This has been happening for quite some time, but we never did anything with the data. So now we do. And this can help us to improve the reliability, to do more predictive maintenance, and ultimately to improve the productivity of the assets. So it's not a dream, it's a reality. It's not only in the traditional industrial businesses, but it's also touching a lot of different applications. We have, for example, a partnership with Schindler. How can they optimize the use of their millions of lifts that they have around the world? How can they use the platform that we've developed, which is an open platform, to understand the flow of people in a building? We've also launched recently a new application that can be used by farmers in Indonesia. So how can they optimize the performance and reduce the cost of the uses of their land in the country? So I think this is a revolution. It touches everybody, and I urge every industry to really look into this, because there's a lot of gains to be made, and ultimately will have a very positive impact for the industries, but also for the world.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Water. I think you've painted a pretty optimistic and very promising view of the use of IoT, which would bring me to my next panelist, Richard. Richard, you have a lot of experience in terms of standards, in terms of putting together, innovation, and many things that you shared with me prior to this. But before you start talking about, your part of the story, maybe I should ask you this question, which actually I should have asked right from the beginning, but it's okay, I'll ask only you. What does value mean to you in IoT?
Value means I get something for what I give. That's really that simple. And in IoT, there is value. I mean, my role is dual role. I'm the chairman of the Object Management Group, which is a 30-year-old standards organization, and we develop IoT standards. I'll come back to that in a moment. But also, I think the primary reason for my invitation here is I'm also the executive director of the Industrial Internet Consortium. This is a consortium of nearly 300 member companies that realize their industries will be disrupted. I'm not talking about the IoT industry. I don't know what that is. I have to agree with Charles. It's about evolution, not so much revolution. So the industries that are going to be disrupted are agriculture and jet engines and manufacturing and transportation and healthcare. Those are the industries that have to look out for what's happening. What's the disruption going to be? What are the standards we need? I don't necessarily know. So we've got to build test beds, that's what we call them. We actually build running systems. We have about 27 of them running around the world today, in China, in Japan, in the US, in Germany, in Ireland, and so forth, where we actually apply IoT to industrial systems. Those are healthcare systems, those are manufacturing systems, those are transportation systems, those are energy generation, distribution, and transmission systems. And see, not just what standards do we need, that's important to get requirements for what actually has to be built, and that goes to standards organizations like the Object Management Group. But also, there are many other things we have to learn, like what are the skills that are necessary? What kind of expertise? How do you hire? How do you find the right partners? How do you build the right software? How do you find the right software partners? These are all difficult questions, especially for companies like GE that have been around 125 years and perhaps were not writing software 125 years ago. So they're in transformation. How do you make that transformation? I strongly believe that you learn by doing. And that means some of these projects are going to fail. And I'm going to tell you which project. Maybe I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Richard, pretty good. Very good. Before Charles checks me again, yeah.
Damning with faint praise. I love
But
it.
you've raised a lot of questions there, and we'll see whether we could slowly, strip it one at a time. When I have
I'm
to
sorry,
move
you're
over,
asking me
yeah.
to strip one at a time?
I'm not talking about
You
stripping
haven't
here
even
on
dealt
stage.
cards, my friend.
So, but pretty good questions that you said that you raised, and one of the areas that IoT is pretty big in is in manufacturing sector, right? And this is where I'm going to ask Swarup from Bosch, and your expertise is very much also in the manufacturing area, and maybe you would like to enlighten us on how IoT is used in this area.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to take a cue
Sure,
from
go ahead.
what you asked Richard earlier about
Yeah.
value, right?
Yeah.
For me, value is something that makes your life easy, right? And it's all about making it easy. Now, whether it is in manufacturing, the value is making the work easy, right? In personal life, it is how you do your things easy. Going from place A to place B, if you have a system that can get you there faster, easier, cheaper, that's value, right? So the same concepts, if you kind of apply for industry, being able to go home on time, right, without doing overtime, so that you are able to finish your work on time, having your environment very conducive to do that, in the sense that you're, as an operator on the line, the instructions come to you automatically. You're getting the right parts made. There's no running around. It's like a symphony or an orchestra that's running in your plant. That is what I would say value in manufacturing. And there are a lot of examples that I can quote in our own plants where before in certain plants we had a huge issue with planning. Okay. Now this is a topic that is very close to heart of all manufacturing units. How do I plan every day? And these are in minds of people who do those planning, right? Getting the machines connected, getting real-time data out of it, getting the inventory connected, getting the maintenance connected, and then deriving a real-time plan, and then they don't get executed because of issues that happen on the plant floor. So you have to continuously, replan. And if those cycles happen automatically, people are not running helter-skelter to make their production runs. Right. That makes it easy. Able to find, troubleshoot a problem on a line, right. Okay, keeping a machine up for maximum amount of time, that's value, right? So using IoT, using sensors, because we have machines which are very old, then you can't put a cable in and write software into it, but they do perform very well. So you sensorize them, get additional data out of it, be able to keep the machine up for a longer time, that's value. So those are a few examples that I can tell you in our plan.
So the four of you have so far painted a pretty good landscape about IoT, its capabilities, examples of use cases, and kind of value that it can provide. But at the same time, I think in all the things that you have said, it will have a grave impact on talent and skill sets, okay? What sort of talent is required, what sort of skill sets required for the future? And this is where I'm going to ask Vivek. Vivek has got a very heavy responsibility. He was with NTUC, National Trade Union Council, and he's constantly looking at jobs, jobs, jobs. And, this keeps him awake all night, right? So Vivek, based on what you've heard so far, what do you think would be, moving forward, the kind of responsibilities that you have to take on now for those people who are not only in their jobs, but especially the mid-career folks who are being displaced because of disruptive forces?
So thanks, Rama. And I'm glad he said National Trades Union Congress, because the moment we hear NTUC, I'm sure half of you are thinking fair price, and this half is thinking in NTUC insurance, income insurance. So I come from the NTUC, which is the labor movement, which represents 58 unions in Singapore and 58 professional associations as well. And of course, we are a bit unusual, and that's the reason we are here talking about IoT. And I don't know how many labor movements do that, but Rama is right. It keeps us awake at night, and it keeps us awake not simply to worry about the people who are out of job today. It also keeps us worried about two other groups. One are the businesses. Because we can talk about all the amazing things, But if we don't have the talent that can make it happen, Singapore will not be the hub of these technologies as they emerge. And that's something that we worry about. If we look at what people like Alibaba is doing, for example, in the next couple of years, we are expecting the Alibaba internet car working on the Yun operating system. This is going to be a car which is going to go through the car park, it's going to go through the petrol pump, the Alipay is going to interact with the payment points, and that's how payment is going to be generated. Now you take a step back, you realize that we are not talking about just a play of people who can develop the IoT technology. You are talking about the involvement of the finance team behind it. You are talking about the involvement of the marketing team behind it. And therefore, when IoT is growing by 5.5 million devices, connected devices a day, you realize that the kind of talent you need in order to fully harness the potential of this cannot be limited to just a handful of technically trained people, right? And that's the reason why there was this data recently from McKinsey that on the oil rigs, there are 3,000 sensors, and of the total data that is being generated by these sensors, only 1% is actually being used by the oil rigs, because that's the kind of capacity you have. The second point I wanted to make is, again, that the group that we also worry about are actually people who are in job today. Because Singapore's unemployment rate is still only about 3% for the resident population. It means that a vast majority of those of us who want to do a job are actually in job. The question is, are we making use of this opportunity to learn about the areas that companies like GE and those of other companies where we are working, we are trying to learn what are the new areas that the company is trying to move into. And is the company making it possible for the existing talent to try their hands at these? Because believe me, if you just want to go out there and hire talent that is fully ready for this, there is no off-the-shelf talent available for this now.
So this is where, Uta, I was going to ask you anyway. Go ahead, please jump in.
Yeah. No, so maybe from a company perspective. So 4 years ago, we moved from being an industrial company to a digital industrial company. So we all of a sudden had 14,000 software engineers, which were making up GE Digital. I can tell you from a mindset perspective, this was a huge change for the company. So what we've done internally, of course, we've really made sure that our employees are ready to embrace change. They need to understand what this means for them. They need to understand that it's the way to go for the future. So we've managed to really create this mindset. But what we've also done externally is really make sure that we build more bridges with like universities, schools, so that we really can make sure that the people and the future employees are getting trained to the right skill sets that we need, because that's dramatically changing, and it will continue to change in the next 5 years again. But I think that building these bridges between the industry and the schooling system is a key thing. And 4 years later, I can say it's been very positive. Not always easy. It's not easy, but I think that when people see an interest for them and they're all keen to learn, if they embrace change, it can be successful.
Over to you, Richard.
I think it's important that people realize that this will cause social disruption, and that's why it's really good to hear about how you deal with that, how you do the change management in a real corporation, but how you train people to be in that new world and have the flexibility when you don't know exactly what that new world is. I mean, for example, we know the job of a taxi driver in 20 years is to find another job. And that's important to understand, right? And it's also important to understand, however, that we've been through these disruption periods before. The Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, the Internet Revolution of the 20th century. And it's important to realize that in both cases, there were more jobs afterwards than there were before. They were different jobs, but there were more jobs afterwards. So the Luddites in England and the Webers in Germany both were destroying these automated machines in the 19th century because they were, quote, taking away jobs. First of all, there were new jobs to build those devices and to maintain those devices. But much more importantly, you had increased efficiency, which caused increased productivity, which caused increased consumer demand, which caused increased demand for jobs, more jobs. And I think it's important that we get to the point where we realize these transformations are going to happen.
Yep.
They're not, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And what we should do, what we have to do is prepare for them. So it's really great to hear what you're talking about.
Jump in. Just jump in. Go ahead.
I got to add one more point. I think what we had to realize is that learning will not stop, right? We have to be in a continuous process of learning. You cannot learn something from the university and come and stop there. So, and that's going to be more necessary in the future. In the past, probably you had a degree and you could hold on to that value for a longer time, but now that is diminishing the moment you are out of the university. And so I don't think there should be a need for alumni, right? It should, the college should continue.
You know, I like to be a little bit provocative there, and of course we agree that learning should continue, but this is where I think Vivek, he has shared with me that even the learning process is different these days. So Vivek, you want to, weigh in on that?
I actually wanted to just build up on that. Often in panels, we get asked the question, so what is the skill of the future to learn? And I often give the answer that actually what we need to learn is not the skill, we need to learn how to learn. And I can just share with you my example. Last year, I went through an MIT FinTech course, and that has got absolutely nothing to do with what I do at the labor movement. And a year later, we are now setting up the youth startup initiative, trying to connect our talent to the startups that now need people. And I realized suddenly this became very useful for me. And today, me and the chief fintech officer of MAS, we were sitting together and trying to discuss it, how to get people connected to these kind of jobs. And I suddenly realized that it was useful to my work, what I was trying to do. So going back to that point, absolutely, this is going to be a relentless pace of change. And to be honest, it doesn't matter what we are learning. When Steve Jobs learned calligraphy, he had no idea one day that is going to help him earn a 30% premium for iPhone, But the key was he willing to learn? And what was he willing to learn as he goes? The second point I wanted to make is that that's the employee mindset. But for the employer mindset, it is also important that, as Wouter shared as well, we are willing, number one, to let our own talent learn. The second is also open up our doors so that those who are out there, who are perhaps out of job or who are working in a different industry who wants to move in, we are able to let them come in and learn from us, from our company. And that is for a very simple reason that, number one, that's going to give us access to a talent that is ready to a pool. The second point is that when people come in with very different lens, hopefully they also add very new ideas to our business, because that's the bedrock of innovation. The great thing about Singapore is that we now have programs as part of the policy push. So this year's budget, the Ministry of Manpower announced the Attach and Train program. So actually, there are people who are out of job and they can be attached to a company. They don't need to be placed with the company. They just need to be attached with the company. The government is going to subsidize the salary of this employee. And that ensures that we learn on the job, don't just learn in a classroom. And I think that's a win-win for the business and the talent.
Frankly, attachment sounds kind of painful, but but I think the other country that does a really good job of that, as we were discussing a couple hours ago, is Germany, which has a nationally funded process that's actually managed by the Länder, by the provinces, which integrates people paid for by the governments, I should say, by the provincial governments, with real jobs in real especially manufacturing jobs. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of new manufacturing jobs over the next few years. But as long as they recognize that they're being placed in jobs that people really need, that the companies really need, I think that's critically important. And I think it leads us to the question is, what else should governments do to make sure that we're ready for the social disruptions that are coming?
This is where I go back to you, Charles. You started this whole storm about people and mindsets, yeah? So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to bring it back again to the whole topic on IoT, which is in the kind of work that you've been doing so far. Are you beginning to see new jobs being created in this IoT world?
Not as many that are needed. I think what we can do is everyone loves the idea of IoT because it sounds new and fancy, and then now it's digital disruption. Let's jump on this bandwagon. We need to bring in different types of skill sets into the organization and people who can actually go between IT-minded people and technology-minded people. And you see like these new CDO or Chief Digital Officer type roles around that space. But what it's going to be is a different level of skills. I don't think those jobs you're going to see will come inside the company as much. I think what people will do, especially for the labor-intensive stuff around services, management and support, or break-fix around IoT solutions, they'll try to outsource that. instead of bring it in-house. So I think we will create those jobs, but it doesn't mean it'll be in the same company. You might just start offshooting or outsourcing it to somebody else.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the term Chief Digital Officer. I was having a good discussion with Walter, and I think in GE, you guys did something quite different. I believe last year you created the CDO post and you got the CIO to report to the CDO. You want to say more about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's just an organizational structure, but yes, the digital is so key for the future that we have appointed a CIO, and every business has now its own CIO. Of course, it's one big team and everybody works together, but ultimately we really want to focus on this whole digital opportunities and everything that is offered by industrial IoT. So to be successful, we need to put the right people in place. We got a lot of people from outside, because I think that's another interesting thing, and this is a good example, these kind of events. You know, it's an ecosystem. It's a group of people and companies, governments, smaller, bigger, that will contribute. And in the end, it's a team effort. We'll be successful all together, and everybody needs to bring his piece. So we're trying to do that a lot, building the ecosystem, working with smaller companies, application developers who can get access to new fields where they would never have been able to access before. So now the IoT can bring this to them. Right. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And Swarup, what about you in Bosch? What are kind of new jobs or new capabilities that you're beginning to see happening?
Well, actually, there's a lot of new business models that is getting created, right? Just like Walter said, as a service, and a lot of data analytics that's going to come in. These are new fields which are being explored. Artificial intelligence is one of them. How to use deep learning to kind of understand machines better, processes better, improve that. Getting into the autonomous driving, that's a new field that's coming up. So a lot more software kind of, but there's behind that software, there needs to be domain, right? I mean, just the coding skills is not enough to put this into practice. So getting the 130 years of experience in the manufacturing, in automotive, brings that domain, and with the software skills, you're able to then add value to the companies.
I was actually disappointed, Swarup, that you talk about it from a technology standpoint. Yet again, the real value is in the vertical markets, right? The domains that use that technology. I mean, for you guys, it's manufacturing. As you know, the first test bed that we built is actually led by Bosch and Tech Mahindra, and it's in the manufacturing space, and it's been a tremendous success already. It's just now 2 years old, and that's a great example of learning something by doing it. Right, I mean, that's actually being rolled out to, maybe you should talk about it.
Yeah, we have the second test bed going on, right? A couple of test beds with, and this second test bed is actually more interesting. It's with IIC and Industry 4.0. Looking at both the reference architectures, combining them, getting the best out of both, and seeing how it can help. I mean, that would be a true example of how things are going to go in the future.
Richard, you raised a question just now about what would governments be doing. And I think I still remember that. I'm going to, somewhere or other, I'm going to switch to Vivek, because I think you've been grappling with that as well. And related to that, what would be some of the policy drivers that must be put in place to allow this to happen?
So I think there are certain things that are happening today. As I mentioned, the Attach and Train program, which is quite a progressive step. We have the National Jobs Bank. There is something that the labor movement called for this year during the Committee of Supply debate, and that is also setting up something which is like a skills bank. Because it's important for us to have a sense of when we are bringing in new investment, when we know different kind of jobs are going to appear, whether we have the right skill set within the country, among our citizens, among the residents, to meet those kind of requirements. And I hope that we will reach a situation where it is a progressive, ongoing process when we are trained in something, we have picked up some experience in something, and then there is somebody who is keeping track of the kind of skills we have, so that whether we are looking at future investments or whether ensuring that these people have, progressive careers, we are able to have a good sense of that.
Richard.
I'm just glad nobody said data scientist. Data scientist, that's the future. By the way, there's an older word for data scientist. It's called statistician.
right. Actually, I was going to ask
Go ahead, you can ask the question. That's
right,
all right.
yeah, okay.
I'll ignore it.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned that you've been involved in several test beds around the world.
Right.
Some are IoT related, I believe.
All-
What are some of your, all of them?
All of them are
Okay.
industrial IoT. So we
Industrial,
focus, we don't focus on smart refrigerators, although I'd love to have one myself. But we focus on industrial solutions. So solutions in healthcare and manufacturing and transportation and energy generation, distribution, and so forth.
Yeah. And in all those test beds, how do you deal with skill sets? Getting the right people with the right talent to be involved.
I'm glad you asked that question because the answer is I have no idea. We're learning. That's the whole point. I mean, none of us knows the answer to those questions. None of us knows what the skill set of 20 years from now is going to be. And if we said so, we would be lying. So the whole point of the test bed is learn. I mean, some of the things are obvious that you have to learn. For example, what standards do we need? I mean, GE engines that you just heard of collect something like a terabyte for a 6-hour flight, something like that. So, well, guess what? There are engines from some other vendor named that also collects something like a terabyte. But they collect it in a different way, so the semantic description of that information is going to be different from those two manufacturers. So we know that you're going to need standards in that space. We also know you're going to need information about how to hire people, how to train people, how to retrain people, how to find partners, how to build the right relationships, the right ecosystems. That's what we're learning by building the test beds, and we have about 27 of them today.
Yeah, one other thing about it is that no one company can do everything, right? You have to have an ecosystem. I mean, recently we announced the partnership with GE, right? Where we kind of leverage each other's capability to put the two platforms together and kind of drive more value. So even in the test beds, it's not just one company that's involved, right? There's an integrator who has to put it together. There's a technology partner who brings in technology, and there are domain guys who give the domain for it. So it's going to be a mix and match of so many different
I think you've
ecosystem players.
reinforced the point which actually Charles made in the earlier part of the morning, which is collaboration, partnership is key, right? In any kind of new technology right now, nobody has a monopoly on knowing everything.
It's not about technology. It's about
It's
integration.
not about technology,
right? It's
okay.
about integration. The reason collaboration is important is because what you're trying to do is put together things that you didn't expect would ever be put together.
Right.
That's why semantic integration is so important. That's why you have to learn how to do it.
Good.
I'll keep interrupting you. Don't worry.
Extreme. Okay, so this is where we will probably ask the audience if you have any questions, and I do believe that there are some questions that's going to come up from the online system, the Pigeonhole. But anybody from the audience, if you, yeah, please, come. Can somebody give him a mic, please? Hello? Give him a mic? Yeah. Or you can take my mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Rama, and thank you very much for a really nice conversation. The question that I had was, you're talking about value and creating jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And when, looking at the whole opportunity that IoT and this new world presents in terms of creating value, creating jobs, I was trying to think, how can we measure it? So I was kind of thinking that, okay, in the afternoon session here, Thomas Jacob talked about looking at the IoT scenario in terms of 3 sets of activities: the sensors, the software, and the services. And then the other part of the value is, with all these IoT activities, what is the value that is getting created in manufacturing, in retail, in other industries in terms of additional revenues that they are generating because they're now doing things better and in a more different way, right? So my question really is, the second part of it is difficult to measure, but the first part, in terms of the IoT economy, in terms of the business that is being done today in sensors, software, and services, what is the size of that economy?
So forget, I don't care.
I
No,
care.
seriously, I don't care. That's not important. Look, the technology of taking information from sensors and gathering that information together, doing real-time predictive analytics, and then delivering it as decision support to decision makers or delivering it directly to actuators in the real world. None of that technology is new. I'm sorry. Did I say that aloud? I'm sorry. None of it's new. That, yes, there's a market there. We can count how many sensors are sold and what the total value of those sensors is. But the interesting thing is the disruption in the markets that use that technology. The agriculture, the healthcare, the transportation, the manufacturing. That's what's interesting. And the value comes from efficiency, which you mentioned, absolutely. And you can measure efficiency. There are ancient measures like net present value and return on investment, nothing particularly new. There's also new business models. So you've heard a couple of us talk about new business models, and you can measure that, right? It's a business I didn't used to be in. It might be leasing jet engines, for example. They like to call it power by the hour. I like to call it propulsion as a service. But let's not forget the third and hardest one to measure, which is lost business due to not keeping up with what the technology can deliver. So you heard a mention of Schindler. It turns out Schindler is not the only manufacturer of elevators, lifts in the world. There is another one which did not digitize early in the way that Schindler did. Somebody else swooped in and provided maintenance for those elevators worldwide at about half the cost of the original equipment manufacturer. So the original equipment manufacturer lost something like 60% of its maintenance revenue, which fortunately was only 80% of its revenue.
So, you go.
Mine's real quick on this, about the comment about when you try to measure the value of it. Here's a little secret. When you look at what analyst firms come out and they talk about the market value that's going to be created from IoT, it's not net new. I mean, this is stuff, they're carving it out of the ICT spend. So it's not like we're saying this is going to be all new. They're sort of going, okay, well, this is actually IoT, and this one is, and this one is. They're pulling it out. So a lot of the stuff, it's the things we're already measuring in ICT spend, we're just sort of carving out this new thing to create a buzzword and sell more reports.
Understand. Thank you.
I'll try to give you a figure. I'll dare. in sectors that we know about. So, of course, IIoT will bring a lot of additional business, but it will also bring a lot of optimization, productivity gains. So if I look at industries like power generation, healthcare, and transportation, we have calculated that a 1% improvement of efficiency in the usage of the equipment, of the engines, of a locomotive, of an MR scanner, will generate about 150 billion of savings a year for these industries. So it's not a number that has been invented. We know these industries, we know what's happening there, and so it has a big impact. Huh?
Oh, I really like that. 1% savings
just for these three industries, 150 billion a year
and it
saving.
Translates to 150 billion savings.
Yes,
wow.
saving
And those are US dollars.
Yeah, US dollars. Yeah, US. No, US Singapore dollars.
Of course, Singapore.
not Australian
Anyway,
ones.
The Singapore exchange is quite good anyway. Okay, so pretty good, very good. I hope they have answered some of your questions. Let's get back to the various questions that we have here on the screen. I'll take the first one. It's got 5 votes there. Which of the companies on the panel willing to talk about paradigm shift individuals? Okay, I'm trying to think about what it means. I assume.
Which of the panelists understands what the question means? Because you're taking it.
I don't understand that paradigm shift.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can attempt to translate it. I think they're looking at your organization and whether they're champions, they're people who are willing to take the paradigm shift because things are moving. We talk about social disruption. We talk about disruptive technologies. Are there people in your organization who are championing this cause, who are motivating your people and moving them in the right direction? Anybody here would like to take it?
I can. That question I understand.
Yeah, okay.
No, so if I look again at my company, it's been driven by the top. And in the end, when we started the whole journey on becoming a digital industrial company in 2010, it was a vision from our CEO who's been keeping contact with a lot of different industries, really looking closely what has been happening on the consumer internet, of course, and trying to see how this could be leveraged in the industry. And he's been the champion, he still is the champion on this, right. And he's been driving it through the organization. Of course, there were people that doubted, should we do it, should we not? But he said, there is no discussion, we do it, and I'll put the resources that are needed. We strengthened, we needed to maybe hire some external talent. We've brought some companies to acquire some additional skills. But in the end, it needs to be driven by the top.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, even in Bosch, our CEO is also our CTO. I mean, German company, very technology savvy, right? And he also believes that software is going to change the way Bosch is going to go forward. And Bosch Software Innovation, the company that does this IoT for Bosch, is directly reporting to him. That's the importance that he has given to this segment. And so he drives it from top. So
I think it's, I'll tell you the way I think of our consortium, the Industrial Internet Consortium, maybe answers your question, which is that's 300 companies that realize their industries are going to be disrupted. Again, forget the sensor makers. We do have sensor makers and we have analytics makers and so forth. But the roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of our members that are agriculture companies and banks and mining companies and transportation companies and energy distribution companies, they're the ones that realize they're going to be disrupted, and they'd rather do the disruption than be disrupted, right? And in every case, it's exactly as Bosch says. It's someone at the top who's made that decision. They're going to be disrupted. Let's find out what the disruption is, and instead of waiting for it.
Good, Richard. Vivek, I think you did share with me that in your dealings with various companies and organizations, you do find these so-called champions. Are there some examples that you can share with us?
Yeah. So my examples are actually going to be even people very much at the working level. In fact, there is someone who won our Mayday Partner Award last year. When she joined the workforce, she didn't even know how to speak proper English. She was just secondary school educated. She joined the workforce. And after she joined, she had a sense of aspiration that she wanted to add value. She went to do her English speaking course. She went to do her night tech. And she went then to do the specialist diploma in aerospace. And today she is working in the aerospace sector, and I can tell you her employer is not likely to let her go anytime soon, because she's really keen to keep upgrading herself so that she can keep adding extra value. So I would say that, yes, absolutely, the mandate from the top is very critical, but at the same time, within your workforce, at the ground level, you need to find people who are very excited by it so that, the momentum is built.
Pretty good. Can we have the other questions up? So I'll just take one more question from the screen. I believe there was another one with 5 votes. Yeah, okay, so we'll take this one. IoT will eventually displace certain routine jobs, in turn create new ones. And we've been talking about that. How will governments and businesses react to this? Old value will be destroyed and new value will emerge. Anybody wants to take that?
Well, I can tell you how they're going to react to it. They're going to resist. They always have in the future. They always have in the past, and they always will in the future. Unfortunately, those that resist the best will lose the most, right? And so the opportunity is there. And we can point at this at the Industrial Revolution, but you don't have to go that far back. Most of us remember the Internet Revolution. In 1990, there were not many webmasters. There was just one. His name was Tim. That's actually true. And now there are millions of webmasters. So new jobs were created. But more importantly, and as I said earlier, I think let's not lose the recognition that higher efficiency means higher productivity, which means higher consumer demand, which creates jobs. Every time you have these technology transformations, and whether it's the 3rd or the 4th or the 12th, it doesn't really matter. More jobs are created by the end than the jobs that were created before, than the jobs that existed before. We just have to be prepared for those new jobs.
Very good note. Charles, you'd like to add to that?
I tend to agree a lot with what Richard said about this, because it goes back. This isn't anything new to us. We've seen this stuff again and again. 100 years ago, if we're sitting here, how many of you would be farmers? What would it be, like 80, 90% of us would be farming? We constantly move on with these things, so we just have to accept it. I think I'm old enough now where I've sat through quite a few. You're talking about losing value. I mean, I went to university and studied finance and economics. Excel came out, and half what I learned was just down the drain right there, since I learned how to use a formula. So you constantly have to do this and learn new things. And I think there is going to be a lot of resistance from a lot of countries. And I think if you look around, it'll be pretty easy to pick out which ones it's going to be, because we've seen it before. Same ones that resisted around things like mobility and cloud or whatever else are the ones that are going to resist on this, and to the one that comes after this and the ones following. So, I mean, we need to be more open. We need to accept it. We need to put some sort of a net there to help the people and give them the opportunity. But we also have to face the fact that we can't bring everybody forward. It is going to hurt some people. Yep. And this is what always happens. And it's not great, but it's the price we pay for this type of technology.
So pretty good. Yeah, please, Vivek.
Go ahead.
Yeah, anyone, please, just
I
jump in.
just wanted to share maybe a quick real story. So DBS is one of our largest banks, and when Piyush Gupta took over in the bid for it to become the digital bank, of course he couldn't have replaced the 22,000 people working there. So he experimented with training, and one of the insights is that adults don't respond very well to classroom learning. Right? And after the first couple of rounds, he realized it was just not working. And that's where DBS moved to the mass hackathons that they did, taking people away, bringing them to a garage, giving them a challenge, and seeing whether they are excited by what they see. And there was a whole bunch of people who were completely non-digital. 13,000 people, from what he shared, went through it. And today, DBS is very well on the journey to become a very good digital bank. They have been winning global awards and things like that. So how the businesses react will need to be more thought through than just the desire to say, let's bring in talent from outside because there are people out there who are trained in it. They won't understand your business. We need to get people who understand the business in the industry to change themselves, and there has to be new ways to try and do this.
Well, I'm very excited on the whole IoT, and I think it will bring a lot of improvement to the world. Let's look, if you improve the productivity of engines or of power plants, you consume less fuel, very positive impact on the environment. If you manage to connect all these MRI scanners in hospitals, you'll be able to diagnose better health conditions for patients. So I think this opens a whole new world of better use and ultimately a better world for everybody. So I think it has a lot of positives.
I think it's a very good note to end. Ladies and gentlemen, I must say that this has been a really exciting panel discussion. A big round of applause for all of them for sharing their insights. And thank you very much. I enjoyed moderating this session as well. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you so much.